I think this idea of painting loose and free is about giving yourself permission to be playful.
Hi, I'm Angela Fehr. Here on my channel, I empower you to become your own favorite watercolor artist with tips to help you grow your skills and artistic mindset to help you love your watercolor journey. Today, we are celebrating World Watercolor Month. All through the month of July, we have watercolor techniques to help you grow as a beginning painter. And beginners don't have to be locked into a rigid, unforgiving learning process. This is not just about learning the rules. This is about learning to paint from your heart and creating an enjoyable painting process. I'm a lifelong learner in watercolor. I haven't quit learning yet, so I determined long ago that I would have as much fun as I could in the process. And I think that you can do that as a beginning painter too. I've teamed up with World Watercolor Month and doodlewash.com to bring you weekly lessons to help you grow your skills in watercolor. This week, I'm painting along with the prompt Loose and Free, perfect for a heart-led process. We're going to be using a wet on dry technique to create just an intuitive painting using some of my favorite colors. You don't have to copy exactly what I'm doing on the painting. Think about the principles and techniques that I'm using and how to apply them with your own favorite colors. Look for patterns of light and dark and enjoy this wet on dry process. Don't forget that there's a supply list linked up in the description below the video. And I have additional beginner technique lesson content in my Fearless Artist community. I encourage you to check that out, and I've linked that up below as well.
So today's prompt is loose and free, and to me loose and free means getting to do exactly what I want in watercolor. And sometimes what I want to do is just forget about rules and play with beautiful color and indulge my love of bright and vibrant watercolor. So we're going to start with just some lovely intuitive mark making. I like to use the side of my brush for this and just get some nice rich saturated pigment down on the paper. One thing I see beginners doing that can often cause them to struggle is not having enough paint on your brush. Take a minute just to stroke that paint and get a nice rich saturation on the tip of your brush, and then you'll see that color just be so much more excited about releasing onto the page and dancing across the paper. Look at how beautiful that is. This is the Floral inspiration set from Daniel Smith. It's just 6 colors and lots of space for you to add more beautiful hues in a lovely travel palette size. And I really like having these lovely colors at my fingertips. This is Quinacridone Rose and Cascade Green. Working with loose and free, just dragging some paint across the paper. Use a small piece of paper if you're worried about messing up, and then you'll feel free because it's just a little piece of paper. Let's grab some Quinacridone Gold and put in some warm fluid color by using a juicy brush and dotting that gold into the wet paint. I can really see that color start to flow. Free means this isn't turning into something. Sometimes we start to see things, shapes in our painting, and we're like, oh, now I have to make it into a flower because I saw a flower. We are loose and free. We are able to make it into anything out of our imaginations right now. So I'm trying to be as creative and imaginative as possible and give that watercolor a chance to surprise me. I'm going to go back to some of the original colors I started with, back into the Cascade Green. What happens is I add new color, and I'm working wet on dry, so I've got space for white space where the dry paper is resisting the paints, and I've got wet paper where I get that beautiful movement of fluidity. And just look at how beautifully those pigments combine and flow into each other. Really light touch and not in a rush. I'm going to go back into the rose again and try to up my balance, my proportion of this beautiful rose color in the painting. I'm going to just tap. Red is a dark value color, so it's taking some of the lighter values away from the painting. I don't want to think, I know red is bright, but that doesn't mean it's light. It is actually, usually reads as almost a near black in your painting. I'm working with 100% cotton paper. It's an artist quality paper. I'll link the supplies in the description below the video. Using 100% cotton paper gives you a paper that's much more receptive to letting the paint and water flow and mingle together. It dries more evenly, consistently, and you just get a much more consistent performance from your paper when you're working with 100% cotton. A little bit of spatter. I love the way spatter breaks up a solid passage of color with just a lovely little bit of variety. And I'm also going to use a damp brush to hide some of these white spots. And that will just bring the other white spots back. It won't look so busy if we have just a little bit of a balance between hard and soft edges. I'll soften over here too. I like giving room for the color to flow in like a neutral kind of way. Look at how kind of murky and grayish that area is down here, because we let the colors flow together. All this month on learn.angelafehr.com, we're going to be covering beginner techniques. This isn't just any beginner course. This is all about being a beginner in a heart-led watercolor style. You want to paint intuitively. You want to learn watercolor techniques, but you don't want to be bound up and feeling compressed by the rules. You want to know techniques and also have that freedom to listen to your own creativity and to trust yourself as you learn to paint in watercolor. And that's what I'm here for. It's fun to see how this loose and free painting has evolved. I'm enjoying seeing those transitions of color that happen, even though we're just using 3 colors, that Cascade Green, the Quinacridone Rose, and the Quinacridone Gold. The other colors in the palette just aren't getting any mileage today. We can do so much just with 3 colors and really create some beautiful effects. I'm using line right now and a thicker amount of paint. Most of the painting is still wet, so the brush marks I'm putting down right now are going to be a little bit softened as they kind of merge with the wet paint on the paper. And I like that. I think that gives us some freedom and some unity in the different elements of the painting. Lines are fun. Let's go back to the rose again. Just a little bit of spatter. Again, the rose is like a black, so it's breaking up the pattern on the paper, but it's also adding dark value color. I think this idea of painting loose and free is about giving yourself permission to be playful. Paint imaginary objects. Paint just for the transitions of beautiful color. You don't have to know what you're doing all the time. I think when we don't know what we're doing, maybe we give a little bit of room to our creativity. Let it come out to play. I don't love all the red splatters down here, so I'm going to just merge them a little bit with just a little gentle teasing with my brush. Some of the Quin Gold, I can just blend them into the painting just so they're not so dominant. Maybe a little bit of the green as well. As your painting starts to dry, you have time to play with line. Again, it's dried enough that I can create some soft marks and some that are a little bit crisp. Get that variety happening. I think key to having freedom, when we talk about painting loose and free, sometimes we give ourselves too many options. Give yourself a limitation. In this case, 3 colors, and working wet on dry, then moving into a more wet and wet style as everything kind of got juicy and moist on the paper. That gave me some ground rules. I didn't add in any additional colors. If I wanted variety, I'd use the colors that I'd chosen originally and add variety through texture and mark making. When we give ourselves those limitations, it forces us to be creative in other areas. And that works really well for me when I start a painting and I don't really have any big goals in mind. I just want to let my creativity out. Working wet on dry like this, starting with that first intuitive mark, gives you a little bit of control to be able to create that path of color in your paper, and while also giving you some options for beautiful fluidity and a wet on wet look. If I had wet the entire paper down before I started, I wouldn't be able to have these little sparkly white marks through the painting. They would have just been blended away in that soft, flowing wet and wet method. So working wet on dry gives me a little bit more freedom for being able to create some white space in my painting.
Thanks for watching. If you're painting along with this video or joining in on World Watercolor Month, don't forget to hashtag your projects when you post them on social media using the hashtags on the screen here. And I'd love to hear a comment from you. What are you struggling with in your watercolor journey? What technique seems like it's the hardest for you to learn? I'd love to address that in a future video. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.